What should we do if the audio can't be fixed even after being put through Audition? Should we attempt another run through or just leave it as it is? This is more of a procedural question than really a technology question. But so, well, all right. So the short answer that I give here is that you shouldn't give up and you should keep trying stuff. But you should really kind of also understand that these problems that you run into when you work with audio files that are deficient is part of the reason why techniques like ADR exist. How many people know what ADR is? 2 or 3 of you? All right. What is ADR? Go ahead.
That's where like you go into a booth and you record the audio or dialogue for like a scene after, like, let's say like just the onboard audio of the original recording, just this stuff you can go back in and redo it.
Yeah, it's the 3-letter acronym stands for additional dialogue recording, but it is exactly as you say. If you come to the end of production and your production audio sucks, you can take your principal actors, put them in a sound booth, play the video for them, and have them re-record all their dialogue in a soundstage or in a booth. It's also called looping. So if you ever hear the word looping, we need to loop the dialogue. That's what they're talking about, ADR. So
they called it looping.
What's that?
You know why they called it looping?
Well, because they used to just loop the tape. Repeat it until you get it right. So there you go. Evan with the encyclopedic knowledge of production audio and post-production audio. So I don't know if that actually answers this question adequately, but realistically, you know, if you're asking a question about should you attempt another run through, the real question you should be asking yourself is, are you satisfied with how it sounds? If you aren't, and you have time, I would give it another shot. If for some reason you were experimenting with some settings and you tried something and it didn't work out, you can always remember not to try that one again. But more importantly, when you do run into a technique that does work, you should probably be taking notes about what you did or save it as a preset, assuming that you'll never, ever work on another workstation apart from the one that you're currently on. This is why I always, and famously, kind of this is where Starkey's technique actually really comes in handy. Take a screenshot of the settings. So bring the settings of that plugin or that effect up on screen. Take a screenshot of it. That'll tell you. I mean, it usually will tell you exactly the settings that you did. Most people probably won't think to do that, which is okay. But if you do, you can create a very capable workflow that you can consistently reproduce again and again and again without those intermediate trial and error steps. So, all right. Do the settings you adjust in any of the processes remain as you set them even after you've saved your file and exited Audition, or do they return to default? Default being capitalized in this fine example. So my official answer is, generally speaking, the settings of each of your audio plugins or effects that you've changed, that you've made changes to, will be remembered the next time you use it. I believe that those are stored in your profile, your Adobe Creative Cloud profile settings. So if for some reason you wipe out your Creative Cloud settings, you might lose those. But then again, they might actually be stored in preference files on the disk of your hard drive. And so your results could vary slightly. And so usually the first time you'll run into an effect or a plugin, the settings are going to be some default settings that the Adobe's created for that plugin or the plugin manufacturer. If you tweak any of those, or if you change the preset to another preset, that setting will be remembered the next time you go into that effect. So, when editing video on Premiere, can I make sound effects? only Adobe Audition can add more precise effects. So I think the question here is, it's the old Premiere versus Audition question. Premiere doesn't really have much in the way of creating sound effects. There's, you probably could, but so I won't say that it's not possible to do so, but it just won't be as high quality as what you could do inside of Adobe Audition, because Audition's made to mess with sound files that way, whereas Premiere, in that respect, is not as likely to function correctly, or just not be as robust, have as many options, many knobs you can tweak to alter things. So it does, but it raised an interesting question between the use of the word effects and the fact that we talk about sound effects versus audio effects. Can anybody just shout out the difference between what we would call a sound effect versus an audio effect?
So sound effect, I would think, would be like something like sort of like a visual effect only for audio. So let's say like an explosion, bang would be the sound effect, while the audio effects would be whatever mixers and such that you put on that modem. Okay, so that's plausibly correct. The idea being that a sound effect is an element. It's a content element, right? Yeah.
Okay. Whereas an audio effect would be a way to alter that to suit your needs, using the computer as the basis of, and sometimes if you looked at old audio effects processors, they were just little computers that were rack mounted, and you just plugged in input audio and took output audio, and that was it. So that's the distinction here. Just to be careful of vocabulary, because it's easy to kind of omit, just use the word effect, and then it can become a problem for you and your sound designer, or you and your sound mixer, if you're giving direction and the context is not obvious. So just be aware of that. What is the best way to do masking in Premiere Pro to separate two videos? This is not an audio related question, but somebody was desperate, so I took some pity on this. So, it's funny is that, I came from the world of and we'll talk a little bit about this, actually. We'll talk about this tonight. So maybe what I'll do is I'm going to defer this because I think I'm going to cover it tonight. But realistically, you're adding an effect to a clip in Premiere to create a split screen. And that's what I think this is to separate two videos, is like a split screen. If that's not right, whoever's question this is, go, Randy, that's wrong. But that's what I think this is. And so we'll talk about that. I think that's something I can make happen. Does Audition hate smartphone audio? I recorded some audio on my smartphone, then uploaded it to Premiere so that I could extract it into Audition. But when I went to play it in Audition, there was no sound. Wah, wah. If you recorded, so literally, if you record sound on your phone, you should just be able to open it directly in Audition. So, you can have an app on this that has a sound recorder. Or if you're just doing, like, if you're shooting camera video and you pull the clip in, you should still be able to send the audio for that to Premiere. Yeah, well, what it does is it extracts it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a project from my hard drive here real quick. And then it spins. Okay, so yeah, real quick, I'm going to do this. So do it in my trusty old Chimera crowdfunding video. Yes, which is complaining about a video filter missing. Okay. So this video right here, so this video, okay, is actually a single clip. If I wanted to, I can hit F and bring up the, this is the match frame for the original clip media. And so I'm looking at the original media of Dana with his half eyelids half open. I'm going to screen grab that one for later because I like to make trouble for him. Yeah, oops, sorry. I'll just do it this way. So, whoop. Yeah, the camera sound. That's my favorite sound when you're doing a. Okay, so and see, just moving the little mouse moved his eyelids. I just like that kind of really purple haze sort of look. All right, so so when you're looking at the original clip, what you can do is you can have that clip selected. Go to where is it? It's under. Is it under here? No, it's not under here because this is for After Effects. I just did this earlier today. So where was I going? I was. Oh, see here, I'm gonna struggle, and you guys are gonna laugh at me, but that's fine. And maybe I'll do it through the sequence. That'll be a little bit easier, but still, you should be able to. Why aren't I coming up with this? Come on. Well, all right. Oh, here it is. Okay, so click on that. Go to. So yeah, when you click on the source, it just goes to edit original. That's not cool. I don't want to do that. Yeah, but you shouldn't have to. So what you can do is you can go to this, select this clip, go to edit on audition, and you can edit either the sequence, which will do the whole dynamic link, sending the sequence over to audition and open it back up as a multi-track project, or you can go to the clip, and when you click that, it's actually going to render out the audio. Notice the file name shows you the clip name, audio extracted. So there's the clip name, and it says audio extracted _1 because it's already been extracted once before, .wav. So that was the extracted audio from the video file. This, by the way, is a reasonable use of Adobe Dynamic Link. Basically, sending the file over to be edited directly to edit the audio directly is a valid use. It's it certainly works. It's just, and you can see that I really gave lots of audio headroom here, didn't I? So, I mean, I'll turn the volume up a little bit.
Artists, makers, designers, and
oh, because this is the no, well, I think part of it is that one of these is the shotgun and the other is the or might be the camera mic and one's the lav.
We're a community of artists, makers.
That's the lav.
Right.
And then this is the on-camera audio, which is poopy.
We're a community of artists, makers, designers.
Definitely has more of the room. But the nice thing about recording with multiple microphones, with one very close mic and then maybe a separate one that's nearby that has a little more of that room, is that you can then creatively choose how much of that space you want to add to that voice, as opposed to if all you have is the long, the 3 or 4 foot away shotgun mic capturing dialogue, and you get all this room atmosphere. You can't really remove it. It's it's impossible to remove, practically. So the, having 2 microphones, one a close mic and one more kind of just a little bit distant to capture a bit more of the room ambience is a nice post-production strategy.
Makes a little bit more stereo image too.
No, I don't do it that way. Because
You separate a channel.
you could separate it. You could also run effects on the roomed mic to make it more spacious sounding and spread the stereo image. That's not something we're really going to cover, but it's another good idea. So, but you'll notice that, yeah, so the important things to take away from this is that when I opened it, it extracted 2 files, one for each microphone or each audio track from that clip. If this was a stereo pair, it would have been, if this was a stereo track, it would have come in as a single stereo wave file. Just be aware of that. All right, so that is the notion of extracting. Oh, and the other thing to take away from this is that when you do that extraction, where you come up here, you select a clip inside of the sequence, go to edit in Audition. is that when that comes back, this sequence has that new wave file replaced the original camera audio. So for both tracks or both microphones. And the reason you can tell this is because the audio file is a different color in Premiere. Usually audio files are colored a certain color in a sequence. So just so that you can see it a little more clearly, you'll see that camera audio has the same kind of blue background by default as the video clips that are camera video, which are separate from titles or from, well, actually this is actually the After Effects video export. This is an adjustment layer, so these are like still images and other things like that. So just be aware that you have this is camera audio and this is extracted audio. They are still linked to each other, so it's kind of cool. Okay, so that was that question. Let's move on to, come on. There we go. We might come back and do some more with this in a second. Is everything done in the waveform editor destructive with the exception of real-time clip effects, or are there other operations that can be done in the waveform editor that are non-destructive? Really, that's pretty much it. The real-time effects rack is the only way to non-destructively alter your sound. But then again, the idea, so what this is talking about is in Audition, you have this effects rack here that you can use to affect the sound. So let's go with this
We're a community of artists, makers.
with this lav mic audio, okay? And say we want to apply an effect to it. If we come over here and we do a well, let's go something that's actually going to sound funky. So I've applied an effect to it, and you see that the waveform has changed. So the waveform is absolutely altered by this. It is destructive from that perspective. Now, it's not permanently destructive unless you overwrite the original file, which you really shouldn't do, but again, people are people, it happens. Also understand that you do have a history window. Oh, it's down there, so that's why I was like, where's the history window? So you do have a history window that allows you to see what you've been doing. So you'll see that I opened this file, and once I click on that, you'll see that it goes back to the original shape it was. And then I go to the next step in the list, and every action that you run in Audition will add on to this history. So until you save this file, you can roll back. You can actually even edit these. So you can, well, with this one, maybe not. In some circumstances, you can even alter the values from that effect. So the alternative is that you can come in here to the effects rack, and so this is the original file. See, we're back to the open of the file, and then you can add where is it? Modulation. So you can add a flanger effect, the same flanger effect, and have it just be active. And notice that you turn it on and turn it off, and it doesn't change this audio waveform. However, if you leave this on and then you export the file and you apply these real-time effects, they will change the audio. So it doesn't change the audio you see on screen, but it does change the audio that you hear.
We're a community of.
Well, I thought it would. Come on, tell me that it's working. Dry, wet, yeah, we're there.
Artists, makers, designers, and engineers.
Yeah, okay. You can hear a flanging effect on this.
We're a community of artists, makers, designers, and engineers. We love sharing things with you.
All right, that's a weak effect to choose, but whatever. And then when you go to save this, it will basically print that flanger effect into and make those changes permanent in the waveform. So, part of this is, how do you feel about do you feel about modifying the waveform as you go, or have it be modified in a stack like this that you can disable, modify on the fly? Might be a little, for experimentation, this would absolutely be valid. You could then, once you've created an effect rack that you like, or if you have the effects that you like, you can click apply and it changes your so it's just like adding the effect. The difference here is that if you stack effects, it's going to start with the first one at the top, and then it's going to go to the next one, and then apply the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. So it's like you're running from top to bottom, and how they're being applied, and the order in which you apply audio effects does matter. So just be aware of that. Okay, so that is the real-time versus the processed destructive editing.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Does Audition have a capability like Premiere where you can make a sequence so that you can have two versions?
Generally, you would do that using a multi-track. If you were going to do that, you could do a multi-track session and just have one track in it. That would actually be the closest in the approach to how a sequence works in Premiere. So, yeah. That's the because when you go in here and you work in a waveform, you'll notice that there's no way to there's no project file here. Okay, all you can save to is an audio format. So there's no like wave file project. If you're going to do that, then you're probably best off converting this into a multi-track project and then just have that one clip in it. It's kind of wasteful, but again, that is the closest thing to the sequence that you're expecting. Good question. All right, once you apply a Doppler or distortion effect to a wave file you've created, can you edit it again, or do you start from scratch? This kind of points to that same problem. Well, okay, so there's two approaches to this, and I think that in my rush to answer it, I took one approach and I didn't think of the other until just now, because we just talked like this. So the answer I gave was depends. It's kind of like the question of, can you do more to it? And the answer is obviously you can. But if the idea is that you want to be able to roll back, there's two things you need to consider. If you want to go back to a previous step or an iteration, then you need to be treating your audio assets just like you would your footage, and keep backups of each intermediate step so that you can roll back to it if you need to or want to. So, but yeah, so so this is a little glib, my answer, but it's valid in from the point of view of, do you want to do more with it? You could. If you needed to start from scratch and end up the same exact place as before, now you're back to what I talked about earlier about saving a screenshot or taking notes of the settings that you do so that you can reproduce the audio work that you create. So, yeah. Is the decision between generating sound effects digitally or working with Foley mostly about budget? Okay. Are there situations where digital sounds fit better? Well, yes, possibly, but probably not. Sound effects. This is my observation. Unless you're an experienced and very well-equipped professional, sound effects can be a very sizable part of your budget. And I fall back on and again, back to the glib answer, I fall back to my earlier mention. It's the best sound effects you'll ever use are the ones you record yourself. So if you have the time or the skill, or you have a friend who has the time and the skill and is willing to work for beer or whatever it takes, well, I know some professionals that'll work for beer, but not, not most of the time. But see, so the answer there is not so much that sound guys are notorious for being capitalists. Okay, they will charge you money, and they're worth the money. That's the thing. But if you have a really interesting project for them, a really experimental project for them, one where they don't automatically know the answers to the problems you're trying to pose, they might give you a deal to work on your project because they're going to learn something. And in doing that, they're going to make themselves more valuable to you. So if they're doing on-the-job training, they shouldn't be charging you as much for learning, improving their own craft. But that's a debate for another time. But definitely for you guys, where you guys are at in your tender young careers, most of you. See, that's my needle. You're in the stage where you need to really be focused on learning how a lot of these things work, so that you can have that conversation with the sound designer down the road and know what you're talking about. Okay, so this is a long one. I'm gonna take a swig of water first. When working with sound effects for a narrative or any genre, at what point are the majority of sounds created? Are they placeholders created to help storyboard or rough edit, and then finalized later in post-production, or sound effects created once the film has been edited? This is actually a very, very interesting question. Good filmmakers would hire someone to design the sound from scratch. Leveraging previous work for inspiration has been done before, and it's done widely these days. It's actually a pretty common problem for, and I think the series is Everything is a Remix. How many of you guys have ever heard of Everything is a Remix? Okay, YouTube. Fun fact. Go to YouTube. Look up Everything is a Remix. It's a series. It's a web series. And it's very, very well produced. It's actually very, very appropriate for this class from the point of view of nothing's really original, and most things are leveraging what's come before. So, but I think in one of those episodes, he talks, the creator of the series talks about the fact that, have you noticed that film soundtracks all start to sound very similar to one another? And the reason that is because a director will love a certain piece of work from another film, and they'll use it as a placeholder in the rough edit. And then when the time comes to score this, the composer is going to come in and try and do something, and the director's going to be like, yeah, but I really liked how it swells right here, and it has it. And so it dumbs down the creativity of the entire project for the fact that you hired a composer to come in, score your movie, but then you have all this placeholder sounds and placeholder music. And I mean, and I've done this exact thing where, and I've had other people, one client wanted to have Coldplay in their video. And I'm like, you guys can't afford Coldplay. And so I go to my composer and I say, well, they're kind of into this Coldplay thing, but I really wanted to give them this kind of move, this kind of tone. And the composer came back with something beautiful, it was really, really cool, sounded awesome. And they literally came back with, can you make it sound more like the original sound? And then my composer got pissed, and he got pissed at me. And I told him, I didn't put the sound in there, man. It's not my fault. So just be aware that sometimes, and I mean, he's a real salty dog, man. This guy, I'll say this for posterity. The second time he gave an iteration, and they kept coming back with, well, it really just needs to sound more like this original song. He gave me this just terrible. I mean, it just sounded like garbage can sort of sounds. And he says, here, put this in there. And it was done. It was garbage can sounds done to Coldplay. So he's like, here's something that sounds like that damn song. And I put it in there, and they were like, what was that? And I said, never mind. So yeah, it happens. So it's not just something that you will run into your own projects. It's something that you will run into in client work all the time. Everybody wants to, they want to have the big, beautiful song that everyone recognizes. They don't, and their budget is $500. Yeah, exactly. So give me a break. All right. Is it better to use an entire track for one sound effect, or should you put multiple effects on one track? I think that's what this is. So again, back to the use of language here, multiple effects. So I've got a short answer and then I got a long answer. So the short answer, which is, again, a bit self-serving, but I think this is asking if there's really only one way to skin a cat. But more to the point, I think that it is, if the sounds that you're working on are similar, or the audio effects you're applying to that sound effect are being reused, like you're putting in a reverb because it's a certain space, and you want to make all the sounds sound like they're in that same space. You might have those sounds all be run through a single track, or you run them individually in separate tracks and then submix them and then apply the audio effects to that submix before it gets dumped into the main. How many ways would you like me to show you how to do this? I mean, there's lots and lots of options here. No right answers. So there's no one answer to this that's going to say always do it this way. If the sounds have no relationship to each other, or if you find yourself having to use automation to disable effects or change panning or volume because you've laid two effects in the same track, maybe that's not a great use of one track. But then again, having 800 tracks for your film is kind of a bit much. So, you got to strike a balance somewhere. You might give yourself a budget. You might give yourself, I have 5 sound effect tracks for this film, and I need to fit all of my sound effects into 5 tracks. And if for some reason you get the 5 tracks and you can't make another one fit, then you go, all right, I guess my film needs 6 sound effects tracks, and then go from that perspective. Don't think of it as like, I need to fit everything into one track. I mean, you don't. It's a digital audio workstation. Tracks are what it does. There's really no limit to how many you can use. When editing an audio clip in Premiere and you open that clip on Audition, why does the audio split and turn into mono instead of it being stereo? So this is actually, this happens with the OMF because the file format doesn't really comprehend that a track is anything other than a mono audio file. So when you export an OMF and then you bring it into Audition, the idea of a stereo track or a 5.1 track, or they're all single audio tracks. Their pans are completely locked dead center, so you basically start out with a mono mix. If for some reason you feel strongly, and it's okay, you can, that you want to replace that, you've imported a file with a song, hopefully not placeholder music, whatever, and you want to replace it with a stereo file of those 2 mono tracks, then you should be able to go back to the source audio, bring it into that multi-track session, drop it into a new track as a stereo clip, and then mute or disable or delete the other 2. It's okay. But yes, there's the reason why. So and just be aware that this doesn't happen when you do the dynamic link thing that I talked about. If you open a multi-track session from Premiere into Audition using the Adobe's audio round tripping method, that will that'll preserve tracks that are stereo tracks that are 5.1 tracks, and so on. More of the Doppler effect. Can the Doppler effect be used to make it sound like your effect is way off in the distance? Well, not exactly. I say sort of. It's, the Doppler effect is simulating the way a sound source compresses and extends the audio waveform as it approaches or moves away from you. So it's a dynamic effect, meaning that the idea is that it's an audio source that's in motion. So, yeah, you can have it way off in the distance, but what's really going to differentiate the impression of distance, gain or volume? It's going to basically, you're going to turn that effect down, or you're going to turn the gain on that track down or on the clip to give that impression to the listener that sound is way off in the distance. Not use a Doppler effect unless you're happen to be in a speeding car and you're hearing some dude shouting while you're tearing ass at 55 miles an hour. Yeah, okay, that's plausible use of Doppler effect, is that, it's because as you're coming towards that guy going, ah, you're going to hear, ah, as it goes past. That's what the Doppler effect does.
Changes the pitch as well.
Yeah. If I'm not able to make my own sound effects, is it better to buy those sound effects or find free ones? Okay.
Should be that way.
Yeah, free will almost never sound quite as good as professionally produced sounds. But this was my. You can tell I was getting tired when I was writing these out. YouTube is now where Apple loops go to retire or die. Who knows what Apple loops are? Okay, so back in the day, like GarageBand sort of stuff too, but really this is Final Cut 10, and the sound, the digital audio workstation they used to have with that was called Soundtrack Pro. But it also included these file called Apple loops, which are just basically sound effects, and sometimes they're audio loops for like music loops, like you'd have in Ableton or Acid or whatever. So, but the thing is that back in like the late aughts, I suppose 2008, 2009, when YouTube kind of really started taking off, you never heard these sound effects in anywhere. And so you could like I was doing audio podcasting and I was using Apple loops, and it was fantastic because nobody ever heard them before. And now I've used them enough that I watch YouTube and they're like, everyone still uses them. And it's just like, oh my God, there's a period of time where I recognized a lot of the music, a lot of the sound effects on YouTube for a while. But yeah, so the sound effects, it does go back to the best sound effects you're ever going to use are ones that you record yourself because they are purpose-built for you. They solve your problem exactly. If you go with a pre-made sound effect, you're likely to, most of the time, you're going to make trade-offs or compromises to, because you're like, well, it doesn't sound exactly like the footfalls I want, but it's close enough, so I'll use it. And and there it goes. That's exactly how film production and sound design works in a lot of ways. So just be aware that if you can afford to buy sound effects, you should really try hard to see if you can afford to pay someone to make sound effects for you as your first line of defense. And if it's like little things, then yeah. If it's like crumpling paper, yeah, go get crumpling paper. Fine. How many crumpling? But again, how tough is it to record crumpling paper yourself? Do most sound editors have technical or college training? Well, I happen to, but that's another matter entirely. I honestly don't know. I would think my gut says that mostly people who love it do it regardless of whether it involved a degree. I know that many of you are here for a degree or a certificate of some variety, or just to bone up your skills. And so there's the wide spectrum of desires and of outcomes for you guys. Sound editors, the ones that I've met, I haven't seen that many that hung a sheepskin on a wall and said, look, I studied at this place, that makes me qualified. No, it's the fact that they work with these tools every day, often all day, and know how to work quickly and know exactly what they're doing. When you say, oh, I need this, they go, oh, I have that. And usually they know how they've got a system for finding sound effects that in their library. They will often have paid for some sound effects that they use. But really, really good sound designers will have a library of sound effects that they've made. Those are the ones you want to go back to. Generally, on a studio-produced production, what proportion of sound effects or score are decided before a film is locked versus after the fact? So this kind of goes back to the earlier thing, but a really good sound designer will start working from script in pre-production, meaning that they're going to take the script that you have and they're going to be reading it for sounds. They're going to be reading it for what the sounds of that they might need to come up with. So, and a good ADs or good scripties will also have a lot of these where they talk about what's happening in the scene, what noises they're hearing. If you have a good sound utility or sound assistant when you're doing production sound, they're the ones that are going to be recording the log of what's happening in the scene, what they're hearing. So, but yeah, a good sound designer will start from script and they'll work in parallel with the team, either recording on set or recording in a separate unit entirely to create the sound effects. Is it best to save sound design for the final step of the video finishing process? The answer is no, but it is. So again, it's really good to include sound design up front and have it be consideration throughout. If you wait until your film is shot in the can and rough, you're slowing down. You're going to be slowing the process down. Now, when you're a one-man operation, it's very hard to, you don't have that second person to be in parallel with you. So yeah, but you should always be thinking about your project in terms of sound design throughout the project if you can, and be aware and present to what's happening and what you're getting on camera and what you're hearing in production sound, so that you can either solve problems or come up with some alternate content for your final project or for your final finished piece. The Adobe selection of downloadable audio is a godsend with a capital G. Is there an easier way to locate specific sounds from a downloaded pack in Audition? So locating sound effects can be tricky. So I've used the media browser in Audition. It works okay. This kind of runs again back to this was one thing that a lot of music programs and a lot of like Pro Tools can do this too, is being able to have a database of sound that you can basically query that, with keywords and go, I need footsteps. No, I need footsteps on gravel. No, I actually need footsteps on wet gravel. You can actually do that sort of search. Now, without that sort of information, what you have to do is you have to name your files very creatively with lots of descriptors. So your sound file that you want to look for should have in the name of the file footstep, wet, and gravel, so that you can find footsteps in wet gravel. Otherwise you do have, like I said, there's these sidecar files to a lot of audio things called XMP that can store a lot of that sort of search data. Some tools know how to query it, other tools don't. Audition is kind of middle of the road there. It's not great, but it's not the worst ever. So yeah, it's a problem. Finding specific sounds is a search problem. Yes.
That one chapter 3, the very first of that chapter episode, they talked about audio effects and finding them, and then they gave it suggestions of different websites.
So you can go,
So that they said the Adobe library is really good, and there's a tool called Sound Miner that actually helps. It's a search tool for the sound effects in the Adobe library.
Okay.
That you can use, for example.
And does Sound Miner cost extra?
I don't know. They didn't sound like
Yeah,
it.
they didn't elaborate on
They don't elaborate on such things. Well, all right.
Well, I mean, they did elaborate. Well, they gave out a website like freesound.org that's royalty free, for example.
Sure, and there's another. So there are plenty of sound effect sites. One that I didn't talk about, which is a free music site, How many? Okay. Once again, this runs into YouTube. But how many of you guys have heard of Incompetech or Kevin MacLeod? 3 or 4 of you, so you guys know what I'm talking about. So Incompetech is a site that you can go to. All of the music is Creative Commons licensed, meaning that if you give him credit, you can use his sounds for free. You can use his music for free. The downside is that the secret's out, and so a lot of people use his work, and so you'll hear music and you'll recognize. You'll be like, oh, I know that song. In fact, the semester project that I did my that documentary project for film school, I used some of his music. So you'll see in the roll credits, sure enough, there it is. There's credit for his song. I only used one of his songs. The rest of them I used were crappy, royalty-free sound clips that I paid like $1 each for. It was just like dirt cheap, and it sounds like they're dirt cheap, right? It's like none of them sound, and you got to be very, very careful about that. So the other one though is called Muse Open, MUS Open, and that actually they do classical music like orchestra. They do have some sort of, but it's all like stuff that's in public. A lot of it is in public domain. A certain amount of it is Creative Commons, but there's a lot of really cool music on offer there as well. If you're looking for a classical sound, or you're looking for like Beethoven or Mozart or something along those lines, go to Muse Open. You're likely to at least find something that approaches what you're looking for. So sound effects is a very deep subject. Yeah.
I just wanted to add something else. If you're looking for like other place to check out would be like Overclock Remix. It's sort of like take remixes of like pop, like video game songs, and also there's a lot of independent original work on there as well. So there might be a place on there where some of that could be like public domain or otherwise on there as well.
And it's called Overclock Remix?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
All right. Well, now it's on the record. So if you're wrong, they're coming for you, not for me. All right, cool.
Well, there's always Google.
There's always, and Google is your friend, but Google's also kind of a cruel taskmaster. We're almost there, guys. When it comes to doing Foley work for a film, whose responsibility is it to decide what should be added? Is it up to the discretion of the project's editor? Does the director decide what they want added or enhanced? That's a great question, because you should all know that the director is the alpha and the omega. But so yeah, the director is really always the final arbiter of what's in the film, right? I mean, that's their job. And of course, there are caveats, but he or she should really always consult and know when they don't know the right answer to collaborate with the right people. So the best directors build a team of people that they go back to again and again and again. That's why you've got guys who work with the same cinematographers, the same composers, the same sound editors, the same film editors over and over and over again, because they already got that relationship. Not everybody's like, hey, I want to work with a different person each time I make a movie, because damn, that's a lot of work having to build a relationship again and again and again. Yeah, because you don't know until you know. It's like once you've done a project with somebody, you know exactly what these guys are capable of doing. And if they suck, you're like, well, that was great. And then you go build a new relationship with somebody, because unless you want to go back through that person, you move on, and that's okay. So just be aware that the director is the boss. He's the CEO of the production. The chairman of the board is the producer, but the CEO is the director. He's the chief executive of the film, making sure that that vision is being realized. What do you usually want to do when you want to make your own sound effects? This was another gimme question. I thought, oh, that's great. I can just review what I've already said. So the answer to this is, what you usually want to do is record at a high sampling rate. What numbers would you want to be looking at for this? That's a minimum. 48K? Yeah, That's a minimum. But what would be a better choice for sampling rate? What's that? I'm hearing muttering. Come on, guys, spit it out. No numbers? All right, so multiples of 48, so 96, 192. Those would be very appropriate for a higher sampling rate. For sound effects, and the reason why is that that gives you the option of slowing things down. You can take a very normal sound and slow it way down and get full fidelity of that audio waveform. Record at a high bit depth. What am I talking about when I say a bit depth? Anybody? You guys are totally asleep. No? All right, so bit depth in this case would be 16-bit would be like the minimum, 24 would be great, 32 would be outstanding or probably overkill, and beyond. Record with the best microphone you can afford. This is a pretty good microphone. I would actually strongly consider using this to record sound effects. It also costs almost $200. But, you know, you can get shotgun mics that are $1,000, $1,500. Lavalier, what's that? Oh, yeah, no, I mean, $1,000 is just high mid-range for a lot of microphones. You know, think about how much you spend on cameras, and, you know, for really high-end cameras, you're talking $25, $50, $100, $125, $150, $200,000 for camera gear. You could, a sound person can walk into a set and have as much money invested in their equipment as camera department, okay? As much. And those are the good guys. Those are the guys that are worth every freaking dollar you spend on them. And you spend a lot. So, and then last is experiment. You know, the other thing is, like, if you want to really make your own sound effects, you have to learn, you have to have an experimental and open mindset and the ability and the willingness to experiment. Whew. Okay, so that was fun. We're now a little bit into this. I'm gonna start talking, and then what I want to do is I'm gonna start doing the there's a few slides of lecture I want to go through here. We'll probably take a break in about 10 minutes. Take a few minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll cruise through this. We'll do a little, you know, role playing. Not really, but one thing I'll have you guys do is go ahead and log into the server, and when you get to the class, so when you log in is the 74.21C. If you haven't, you can. Oh, which one do I want you to use? Do I want you to use any of these? Let's see. For what I want to do tonight, sure. Just download the class 4 folder to your desktop, and we'll go from there. So that's what we're going to do in the background. So log in. Download those files. We're going to basically open up, create some Premiere projects and experiment a bit with some effects. That's what tonight's about. So, okay. And here we are, effects in Premiere. So when you guys are ready, holla. And then I will, yeah, holla, yeah. All right, so.
See on that button here.
What's that? You shut it off. How could you do such a thing? Is it the bottom? Is this down here at the bottom?
Oh yeah, okay, that's very good. What's this?
I think that's the eject button for the DVD player. So, all right. Okay. So what are we going to do? We're going to talk a little bit about fixed effects. Is anybody aware of what fixed effects are in Premiere? Okay, well, good. You're going to learn. That's the good news. We'll talk about other common effects. We will talk about masking and tracking effects. We will start to talk about things like blending modes. And then we'll talk a little bit about master clips, subclips, nested sequences, and subsequences. And then supposedly there's a quiz. Yay. So yeah, that's your happy noise. I can tell. You guys are like, yay, a quiz. So, all right. So fixed effects. The thing about fixed effects in Premiere is that every clip in a sequence has fixed effects. Okay. So when you once you place a clip into a sequence, it has fixed effects applied to it. Now, by default, those fixed effects are basically default, and they don't actually do anything. But so they come in two varieties. You have video fixed effects, which include motion, opacity, and time remapping. And then you have an audio section where it's volume and pan. So you guys know what pan is, right? It's your left, right, how the audio sits in the stereo image. Because we're usually not talking about a 5.1 surround situation. We're usually just talking about left and right stereo. So so what you'll notice here in this diagram is that we have there's these video effects. You have motion, and under motion there is things like position, scale, rotation, the idea of an anchor point, an anti-flicker filter, which is really for interlaced stuff. You have an opacity group, and the opacity is actually, whoops, and then I go the wrong direction. That little thumb wheel on this mouse is driving me crazy. So you have opacity as the value, and then you have blend mode. Okay, and we're going to talk about what that blend mode means. And finally, you have the idea of time remapping, which is the speed of playback, how fast or slow you are playing this clip. So these are fixed effects. When you drop a clip into a sequence, these are all there. You don't need to add them, and you can't take them away. Interesting. Okay. Questions here? No. Great. So, okay, yeah. Again, so apparently I decided to go through it in the drawing, and so again for your edification, motion. I noticed the important word to take away here is keyframeable. All of these can be keyframed. Now, how many of you guys have worked with keyframes already? Most of you, because you should be doing it, have done it in your last class, right? Yeah? Okay, good. So keyframeable, position, scale, rotation, anchor point. Many of you probably have worked with these already. That's good. Just now you know what they're called. Opacity, I'm sure that you guys have worked with opacity. Time remapping, that's less used. That's not quite as often used by folks in earlier. But you know, if you're fast, if you're speeding something up or slow-mo, this would be where you can play with that. And then volume for audio, when you're dealing with or video with audio, you can keyframe the sound level, and you can also keyframe the left-right position of the image. So then there's other effects, and when we talk about other effects, we're talking about this box right here. The thing that drove me crazy when I moved to Premiere was that there's no way to get effects from up here. I used to be able to get to an effects menu from Final Cut, and I'm sorry, you guys are going to hear me say Final Cut a lot, and it's because I'm scarred. But it used to be that you could find them always from up here, a list of the effects, and now what you have is you have this fine list of effects right here that is searchable. Let me quickly change the brightness here because I'm okay. So you have presets for effects, but then you also have different categories. So you have audio effects, transitions, video effects, and video transitions. So all of these are built in. The nice thing about them is that they're generally searchable, which can be helpful once you start to learn the names of some of them. So if you wanted to key out a and deal with a chroma key or pull a mat this way, you could type the word key up there, and it immediately kind of shows you all of the effects with the word key, actually in the keying group, because remove mat is in that. But so you'll get all of the stuff that's good for keying. If you wanted to do color, you could do color, and then you'll see a search for different effects under color as well. So, and like I said, we'll go into more detail on all of this in another lesson. So what do we do with this? So let's bring this back down to my my slides here. So the effects pane is located, it has its own panel. It's not in a menu. There's different groups. There's color correction, blur and sharpening, keying, and just tons of others. Ones that are very commonly run into are the ones that you see up here. So you'll see a lot of people using color, blur, or sharpen, and sometimes keying, though we will show you keying in After Effects where it actually is a little more. If you had very, very clean chroma key green screen footage, you could pull a very competent key using Premiere. But if you didn't, then or if you had a challenging environment or a bad lighting situation, or you know, the person was wearing green, which we have an example of this, you'll be able to pull a key better in After Effects than you could inside of Premiere. But again, we'll get to that. The other thing to get out of this is that there's a notion of, and this is relatively new to Premiere, is the ability to mask and actually track an effect on screen, which is very handy. You can mask an effect, meaning that when you create an effect and you apply it to a clip, you can actually create a mask around it using one of these three options here. So you can create an ellipse mask, a rectangular mask, or you can draw one. And you have some very useful features here, including the mask path, which will basically move the mask wherever you want on screen. You have a feathering, which is just basically how crisp is the edge of the mask. Is it very soft, and the transition from being opaque and applied to being kind of not there at all. Can either have a very well-defined edge, which would be a feather of 0, or a very soft edge would be a feather of 200. You have an opacity and you have an expansion. Expansion has to do with how the mask grows over time. So you can actually keyframe that. You can animate how a mask will either contract or expand, because this will go positive or negative. You also have the ability to invert it so that you can basically say everything but this area will have the effect applied. And finally, you have the tracking, which is the ability to track that area being masked for basic movement. Okay, this is basic movement. This is just like, is something moving across the screen? Once it's off the screen, the tracking stops. If it passes behind something, the tracking stops. So it's very basic motion tracking. It's not super complicated, but so your mileage will obviously vary. Okay, blending modes. Now, like I said, I'm stuffing a lot of stuff in here. We're going to take a break and then we'll experiment with all of this. So blending modes. There's so many blending modes. Oh my God. The thing about how blending modes work is they affect. So this is the beginnings of what we call compositing. Anybody know what compositing represents? You want to give me a stab at what it defined as? No? That's all right. It's
just give me a second. So compositing is sort of like multi-layer managing, like in Photoshop, only in like a video, like in I don't know, we We went over this in my last animation class.
It's okay. No, actually, you were right there. I mean, basically, the work you guys do in Photoshop, where you'll make layers and you'll layer things one on top of another, you are compositing in a still image. Now, the difference here is that you can composite with video, with motion, as opposed to just one still image. And the good news, or the mind-blowing news, is that the blending modes are largely the same between Photoshop, Premiere, and After Effects. So if you learn blend modes, you can become much more capable in all three of those applications. I am not kidding. Knowing how to blend, knowing blending modes, knowing when to use an add versus an overlay versus, it's like, if you know those sorts of basic capabilities, your speed will increase when you're starting to work in these tools, and your productivity goes up, your hourly rate goes up. Woo, yeah. All right. So yeah, blending modes basically affects how layers on top are interacting or mixing with the layers underneath them. And again, it's identical in function. The same, yeah. So realistically, between Photoshop and Premiere, they're the same number of blend modes. And with After Effects, you get a few more, and that's because After Effects is, well, After Effects. So, and we'll talk about them when we get to them in After Effects. So when we get back to this, you're gonna be like, Randy, we talked about blend modes, and I'll be like, yes, but we talked about them in Premiere, and now we're gonna talk about them in After Effects. So, yeah, prepare yourselves. So there's several categories, and I won't bore you with an exhaustive list here. But they come in certain categories, and again, these are always, you'll see these in all three of these applications. Master clips. Who knows what a master clip is in the context of Premiere? Okay, fair enough. So usually when you have a clip inside of Premiere that you've loaded in a project, if it's in a sequence, you can apply effects to it, right? You get the fixed effects are automatically applied. And you can also, when it's in a sequence, you can add effects from the effects menu or the effects pane to those clips, and they will be applied in that sequence as well. Something they recently added was the ability to add effects to a clip that's not in a sequence. Basically, the clip that sits in your in your project can have some effects applied to it before it ever gets put into a sequence. And the benefit there is that if you ever go to tweak something, so it's like where you can do a single, this is famously what it's used most for, is you'll do some color correction, you'll maybe apply a basic color look to a scene, and then you can apply that. If you use that shot over and over and over again, that color look will just stay with it. And if you go change it in the master, it will update it in all of your sequences automatically. So that's hugely helpful, because it used to be that if you dropped in a bunch of clips and you applied a bunch of effects for color or some other thing, and then you had to go tweak something, you have to go tweak it in all of those cuts, okay? And that's tedious. So lets you apply them globally across all sequences. Subclips. So, basically this will track the in and out points of a master clip. So the, usually when you drop a clip into, say, your source editor, your source viewer, and then you mark your in and your out and you drop it into a sequence. You'll insert or overlay it into a sequence. You will, those in and out points are really just in the sequence. They're not in the clip itself. If you wanted to mark those ins and out points, the other thing about it is that if you use that same clip, it's better to demonstrate this. Let me just demo this really quick. So for instance, we've got this, we'll take this clip again. Notice that this has an in and an out point, right? So here's your in point and here's your out point. Now, that's for this clip, but if I wanted to, say, move my out point here and my in point here, the original in and out points are no longer referenced. You don't have any idea where the original in and outs were for this clip. So how would you track that? You'd have to either go back to the original sequence, assuming you had it, or you could create a subclip with that in and out point for this piece right here. So you can come up here, go to clip, and make subclip out of this. And then what you'll do is you'll actually create a moment in here, and it actually gets a special designation in the media browser or in the project pane of this. Looks like a media clip, and it has this kind of in and out bracket on it. That tells you that it's a subclip, but it also is just basically it's like a clip that you could drop into a sequence with the in and out point automatically figured out for you. And this can be helpful in some circumstances, not always. I tend to use this more in documentary work than in narrative work, but that's, again, that doesn't mean it's the only way to skin the cat. Just keep that in mind.
Does it show up in the project folder?
No, this is just in the project itself. This is just a placeholder. It's like a bookmark of your in and out point for that clip. That's the best way to think of it. All right. And it's a subclip, so it's still tied to the master clip. If you change effects on the master clip, it's going to affect the subclip here. Okay, so things to keep in mind. Can be converted to a master clip, which would basically be a duplicate of the original file, or in the project. It doesn't actually duplicate the media file, but it duplicates it creates a separate master clip that you can add different effects to if you want. But it can be. Yeah, the way I describe it is it's a nifty way to stay organized if you can be non-committal to putting clips in a sequence. Almost there, guys. I swear to God, we're almost there. Nested sequences. So it's very similar. You can actually do the same thing with, you can composite a sequence of clips and treat them like a single clip inside of a sequence. The way that looks is, say you wanted to create a sub sequence of this. You can make a subsequence, and what's going to happen is I will find that subsequence. I tell you. So here you go. So the subsequence shows up, and just the clips that I selected are in it. It doesn't actually create. It doesn't remove them from the original. If you wanted to do that, you could actually come in and. Where is it? Nope. There it is. So you can make subsequence here or nesting it. Nesting is actually what would do this. So nesting is creating a subsequence, but replacing the media clip with a sequence itself. So now you have a separate sequence with those clips in it, and you have the original sequence that points to this one. So it's a way to stay organized. It's not a slam dunk. It's basic compositing. So if you're applying a series of effects that you want to apply to a series of things, you can nest them, nest that sequence, apply those effects to it, and it'll work with all of the clips that are selected. That's one. I mean, that's basically, so when we get to After Effects and we start talking about compositing and pre-composing. So again, you don't need to remember this now, but when we get to that, you're going to see this. You're going to be like, oh, that's just like nested sequences. I'll laugh my maniacal laugh. And then subsequences, again, just like subclips, there's a way to create those into a separate sequence. Doesn't replace the clips, and can be useful for keeping backups of edits. So if you have a sequence that you've cut and you say, I want to try something else, you can select all those clips, make a nested or a subsequence, and it's kind of set aside, and then you can go back and make more changes, and those changes are still in the original, in that subsequence. Yeah, it can work. Okay, break time. Okay, let's resume. So if you guys haven't, why don't you go ahead and open up Premiere. I've got Adobe Audition open right now, but so get yourself to this opening stage, and what we'll do is we'll kind of what I'd like to, I'd like to give you an opportunity to experiment and play around with some of this. So we're going to go through kind of a quick tour of, the review of fixed effects in person. But you guys, like I said, most of you have probably used them. I'm going to create a new project. I'm just going to call this thing Randy. I'm going to put it on the desktop. I'm going to browse to the desktop. That's what I'm going to do. Desktop, and there we go. So just going to choose that, click Randy. For the settings, generally speaking, should be fine as they are. Yeah, so let's just stick with the defaults, click OK. And you are met with a very empty project. So now, just for my own sanity, I'm going to close the preview area so I have a little more room here. But I'm actually going to do the back tick tilde key to zoom this. And I'm going to double click on this to open up my import dialog. So I'm going to go here, go to class 4. I'm just going to select all of these and import them into the base of the project. Now, if I was a nice guy, I would hit Command B, create a bin, call this footage, and drag and drop all of this into it so that I've got stuff. Okay, so there we go. We've got some clips now. So once you have these clips into a project, good idea at this point would be to create a sequence. So why don't we do that? Let's go to New Item, Sequence. Again, for practice reasons, I want you all to do this so that we know that when we're creating a sequence for Randy, that we don't do DV NTSC. That's a no-no. Come up to digital SLR, 1080p, 24. So this will be the sequence I'd like you guys to use. Any questions on this? If you guys are down here looking at DV NTSC, it's gonna make me nuts. So again, available under the sequence presets, under new sequence, find digital SLR 1080p, and then DSLR 1080p 24. You should call this a very witty new name, except that my problem is that my dock doesn't disappear, so I'm going to make my dock disappear. Well, or I'm not. Oh, there's no way to make my dock disappear. This is fantastic. Maybe this is how I do it. There we go, dock preferences. So I'm going to turn hiding on. Good. Okay. Yeah, so because my screen is so constrained, I actually don't have my full possession of my full screen real estate. So I'm just going to call this one test 1 or something along those lines. And I will blindly click OK. And now I have a test 1 sequence. Let's start with talking about fixed versus. Let's start by talking about master clips, right? So each of these clips in footage is a master clip because it's what's in the project bin, right? So each of these files here in the project are a master clip. Okay? Okay. I'm checking to make sure you guys hear me. So if you double click on this and you come up to effect controls, so you see that this is the clip, right? So this is, and oh, I'm going to mute this. And you guys should hopefully mute yours too. We're not going to use sound tonight. I'd like this to be mostly quiet. Yes? Oh, yeah, you bet. I always like my tours to be in the dark. Okay, don't fall asleep. I know that it's 8:45 and you guys are like, but Randy, I'm so tired. Okay, so you're looking at this clip. This is actually the clip itself. This is not a clip inside of a sequence because there's no clips in the sequence. If you go over to effect controls, you'll see that there's this designation that says master. Okay, and so what is that? This is basically the area that you would place master clips. All right, so that's what this is. That's what this is designed for. The other, so what you, if you wanted to add any effects to this, let's find some effects to add. Just for fun, let's put a tint effect, drag it up there and drop it. And now this tint effect is applied to the entire clip. Now the clip will play in black and white, unless you change the mapping white to some other color, like gray, or if you click here and you make it like pink, then it'll be pink. Okay, so that's master clips. You can apply effects to it. These effects will stay with that clip no matter how many times or places that you use it inside your sequence. Okay? If for some reason you wanted to have two sets of clips, or you wanted to have the same clip with a different set of master effects, you would want to duplicate the clip so that you have two master clips. So you can come here, go to duplicate. Now you've got 1 and 2, and if you click on this one, it says copy 1. It is actually a duplicate of that one. So if you remove this, you now see that this one's this way and that one is still red. So these two master clips are of the same media file on the disk, but they are treated separately as far as Premiere is concerned. You should name them separately too. You should not. You really shouldn't be using names like copy 01. Okay, so you can click on it, name it to maybe you take off the .mp4 and you go clean for a clean master, or you can kind of go clean master, and now you know that this one you don't plan on putting any effects on, whereas this one is rose tint. Okay, there. Now you know which clip has got the rose tint on it. This is just one technique. This doesn't mean that you'd always name your clips after what effects you've put in the master, but it can help from the point of view of knowing before you lay it into a sequence which clip you're talking about. Okay, so now we've done master clips. So there's master clip with these effects, and then there's a master clip with no effects, but they're both still of the same media file on the disk. The media file is not the media file on disk is not pink colored like that. If for any reason that you wanted to switch between them, you could do what I do down here, which is double click between these, or you can also come up here to the little hamburger icon next to source and see that all of your open clips will show up here, and they still have, oh, that still has the ugly name to it. Whatever. All right.
Did you name that master, or did it say master? I don't know behind. When it said the master clip, did you name the master?
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I named it by just clicking on it once and then typing over the name.
That just means
It's no, yeah, it does. It just, this doesn't change the, and you guys do understand that when you name, you can name clips in Premiere anything you want. That's not going to change the file name. So the file name is going to stay the same on the disk. This is just for your reference in the project.
And then how did you make the other one from it?
Same way. I just basically came in, changed the name.
But how did you create the second?
Oh, when I copied it. What were you, falling asleep? Okay, so no.
I was trying to figure out.
Got it. No problem. So what I did was I right or control click on this and go to duplicate. Okay.
You can do it for file too, right?
What's that?
You can do it from file as well too.
You could duplicate the file.
I mean, the file menu.
Oh, from the file menu. Yeah, you can come up here to, actually, I think it's under edit.
Edit, that's right.
Yeah, edit, duplicate, and it will duplicate that clip in the project. Okay. So, all right. So now you have two master clips. Let's move one of these. Actually, let's do, let's talk about a subclip really quick. Okay. So let's remind you guys what a subclip looks like. So say you wanted to, just select this, oh, hello, there we go. So you wanted to select just this piece right here where it starts, we'll mark an end. We'll move the playhead to the bottom of this B-roll and move back, and then we'll mark an out, and then come up to clip, make subclip, and now it's created Chimera crowdfunding rose tint, and this can get kind of wonky, but by default it's going to give you a dot subclip. You don't have to keep that name. You can name it whatever you want. You can call it Chimera sign, or just sign tilt, because that's kind of what the camera does. It's a tilt down. Okay, so Chimera rose tint, sign tilt, click OK. Notice that you do have the ability to restrict the trims to the subclip boundaries. What does that mean? It means that if you go in and edit this clip further once it's in a sequence, it's going to limit your in and out points to the original in and out points you're marking here. If you remove it, then you can actually go outside the original in and out points.
How did you get the mix up?
So from here, again, I'll repeat it. So I've got the clip selected with an in and out point, clip menu, make subclip. You can also, no, you can't do it there, but you can right click on it and make subclip here as well. Okay. So you can do it from the context menu by right clicking or control clicking on the pane to make subclip, and you do the same thing. So rose tint, and then erase this part and do sign tilt down. Okay, and then click OK, and now I've got this. This subclip is now in my project. So when I zoom this window, you'll see that I now have this subclip, and I'm going to go ahead and drop it into footage with the other ones. The distinction now is that you've got this regular looking clip, which shows you that there's picture and sound in one media clip. This is the same thing. It just has those brackets on it, which tells you that it's a subclip. That's all it does, is it's just telling you it's a subclip. Once you've done that, if you wanted to, you could right click on this and oh, maybe you can't do it from this one. Maybe you have to do it from the clip menu. So, oh no, you have to edit the subclip, and then you can convert this. So if you wanted to edit the subclip, you have the in and out points that are marked here on the subclip. And then you can actually choose to take this clip and convert it to a master. And so what it's going to do is it's going to basically do, it's just like doing the duplicate maneuver that I showed you before, which is what that's all that will happen is it becomes, it removes that subclip icon, and it's just another copy of this other clip here. So that's the life cycle here. So subclips are pretty straightforward. Again, the utility of these is that if you drag this into the timeline, it's of a certain length, right? So it's relatively, and of course when you do this, it's if the clip doesn't match the sequence settings that we created, it's going to complain. I usually just leave it as I want the sequence to be what I want it to be. So, oh, and I copied the clean master. I was like, wait, where's my effect? So if you copy this in, you'll see that the in and out points were maintained, right? So let's clear those in and out points on this clip so that we're talking about the original. So we'll take this in and out, and let's go. Okay, so by using Option I or Option O, you can basically remove those in and out points from this clip. And now when you drag this clip in, it's the full length, okay? And then when you drag the subclip in, notice that it has the in and out point set. If you have in and out points set on any of these master clips, it'll know that, and then when you drag it into a sequence, it's going to honor those in and outs that you've created. Now, if you're scrubbing through this and you're actually selecting pieces of it, and you're going, okay, here's my in, here's my out, and I want to just overlay it. So I'm going to overwrite, and then I'm going to choose this in and this out, and I want to overwrite So I've created these two clips, but they're of, there are different points in this, and the original media clip only remembers the last in and out points that I've set. So that's the benefit of these of using subclips, is that they're stored inside the project. They're not just stored inside of a sequence. You can recreate the in and out points for this clip by just going over it and then using match frame, which is typing the letter F, and we'll bring up that original clip with the original in and out points on the on that clip so that you can make changes if you need to. But so the difference here is that a subclip is just a bookmark of this stored inside your project. Now, what's next? Okay, I'm gonna kind of fast track a bunch of this. So when we're talking about things like subsequences, right? We talked about nested sequences and subsequences. If you want to nest a sequence, there's a couple ways to do it. You can come over here and click on nest. And so the selected clips, let's say we select these 3 clips and I want to nest them. So I'll scroll down here and I nest them, and I'm going to call this one rose tint experiment, and click OK. It replaces the sequence, those clips, with a new sequence, including the sound, right? So the sound is part of that sequence as well. So it's not just the picture, it's the sound as well that gets dropped into this. If we wanted to unlink it, say we undo this and we wanted to unlink it, we can always click on the linked audio right here, link selection. We can now go and just select the picture, and now audio will be left alone. You right click here, click on nest. Now you've just nested the pictures. So it's rose tint experiment picture only. Okay, and now you've left the audio in the sequence, and you just have the picture in its own subsequence. Okay.
And that's to basically protect a certain sequence that you kind of.
It's a way to. Some people use it to organize their cut. I don't use it that way. I would use this if you were going to apply an effect here. So say you've got a rose tint experiment, you go over to effect controls. Oh, by the way, a rose tint experiment does have a master. Oh, it doesn't have a master. That's right. No, it's just master clips only work on direct media clips. They don't work on sequences. So you can't apply an effect to a whole sequence. But what you can do is in this sequence here, you can, or this clip right here of the sequence, you can add an effect to it. Say we want to do, no, not a star. How about we'll do a blur, because that's easy. Blurs are we'll drop a Gaussian blur on this, and we'll turn it way up so it's really blurry. So now you can tell that it's blurry. But understand that it's just on that sequence. It's not underneath. Underneath, it's still the same sharp, crisp sort of, so it's still the same footage. If you wanted to assign, so say for instance, again,
Underneath, I don't understand.
What's that?
What do you mean by underneath? I don't understand.
So this behaves like compositing, okay? Meaning that when you apply an effect to a nested sequence, you're applying it to everything that's showing in that sequence. And it doesn't affect what's here. This stays the same. It just adds this other effect to it.
So what happens when you render that? I mean, the effect will be rendered with it.
Yeah.
And
Unless you disable it.
And you will still have both sequences?
Yeah, you still have both sequences. If you wanted to export this sequence, you could separately, but you will always have it in this sequence as well. So yeah, part of this is it brings up the notion of what the blur, or what the effect enabling, you can toggle effects on and off. Okay, so over here you have the little FX icon happening, and if you click on it, you'll see that it's on, and if you click on it again, it grays out with a diagonal line through it, disabling it. So this effect is now turned off. It's bypassed. All right. What else is in this particular fun bin? So in all of these, we also have, because we now have clips in a timeline, you do have all of these fixed effects as well. So you have position, you have scale, you have rotation. Okay, you have all of these. You actually have an anchor point, which is subtle because that has to do with how things, where the image grows from, or where the center for the rotation, other things like that happen around the anchor point. So if I do this and I move the rotation all the way to the edge, right? So I'm going to go all the way to here. Now when I rotate, you see it's rotating closer to the corner. It's not rotating the middle of the image, it's rotating the corner. Where if I reset this, it rotates from the center. That's what the anchor point's for. It affects both rotation and scale. So if you scale and you go 0 or 0, 0, right? Now we're scaling out from that corner, from that anchor point, and you're also rotating around it. So that's what anchor point does. Opacity should be pretty straightforward. It's, you know, how it composites. Let's put something else on the screen so that we can composite two pieces together. So let's go back to the project. We will grab, I'll grab this. What's that? Tactus? It's a promo I did, which has a lot of actual. It was entirely done with After Effects.
It doesn't have anything to do with the one we're right now.
With what?
With the one we're working on now.
No.
That's separate.
No. This is just. So you'll see that now we've got, you know, we have two images, one superimposed over the other, right? So we have the rose tint experiment, which is now starting to look like an abomination. And we have this underlying tactus. So if you go in here and you start to affect the opacity, you'll see that you're revealing it, right? This is also where you can start to talk about blend modes. Okay, so this is where blend modes start, and it really never stops. So when you start to talk about blend modes, you have all sorts of different ways. And what we'll do is, let me see if I can give us a little more screen real estate to work with here. So, okay. So when you look through these, you'll see that you have a normal, which is basically the default kind of, it just lays one pixel. Any pixel that's displayed on the top level will completely, eliminate the pixel underneath it. You won't be able to see it. It's going to be hidden from view, subject to opacity rules. But so if you do this, it is fully visible. If you do dissolve and it's 100%, it's fully visible. Now dissolve actually will put this kind of noise pattern on it so that as you fade in and out, it gets this kind of grainy sort of look to it. So dissolve's kind of fun. You have darken, which can be very interesting because now look, it's like it only basically changes the underlying pixel if it's darker. So now computers, since it's darker, shows through the underlying, but the video of the sand and this metal ball is on top. How can this be? Because darker pixels will show through the upper level. So that's the blend mode is darken. So if you also, the opposite would be, the opposite is down here under lighten, but we'll get to that in a second. There's several of these sorts of darkening blend modes. Multiply is another one. You see that it does some more things to the highlights. You have color burn, it can be kind of an interesting effect. A lot of these start to run into what, experimenting trying things, seeing how they look. Sometimes you'll wonder what the difference is between one and another. This is what we call, you should A and B this. You should basically look at one and then switch to the other and see what the difference is and just kind of flip back and forth between them. Darker color, again, this is just the particulars of how this blends. I don't get into too much detail. Let's switch to the other end. Now you do lighten. So now only if it's lighter does it show up on screen. So the fact that the background is white obliterates most of that overlaying that on the video that's on top. Only where it's darker in the underlying video does this show up. So you can do that. Can be very interesting, especially because you got to understand that this is happening like in real time here. It's like you're playing and you have this blend mode happening while the video is playing. It's like, so you can have two things superimposing in very interesting ways. Where was I? Rose tint experiment. Why am I looking at, lighter color.
Dodge.
Yeah, so linear dodge, screen. Screen's a very popular one too. So you have color dodge, linear, and so on. Then we get to overlay, which is has to do with levels of gray. And so if depending on the gray level of the underlying the underlying piece will determine how much of the video shows through. So that's why this is now, because this is not pure white, this is kind of a light gray, you're getting a bit of the underlying video showing, but for the darker stuff that is black, that shows more of the video through. Then you run into the lights, the soft light, hard light. You get into the mixes like hard mix, which can look very posterized. You have difference, which can start to get very weird. But again, depending on what this is, again, so the phrase that I use, and you're going to hear me use for most of the rest of this term, is the rabbit hole has no bottom to it. There is no end to how deep you can go with this. And I'm just scratching the surface with blend modes. Blend modes can blow a lot of people away, and they think that you've done some crazy thing where all you've done is you've done a couple of blend modes, and they're like, "It's amazing," and you're like, "Yeah, it's really amazing. Pay me." And they'll be like, "Yeah, man, we want you to work on all of our stuff." You're like, "Yeah." So just understand that these, the abilities to experiment with these. Try things on, see how the differences, how things change when you choose one blend mode or another. Understand that when you fade them, you're dealing with the opacity of that whole layer. This is not like a mixer where it basically will blend back in the original. It's not that sort of blend. It's not that sort of opacity. This is basically how opaque is that layer using this blend mode on the layer underneath it. So getting through the end of this, you have divide, which is bizarre. You have hue, which will just change the color value, but for a black and white, it's not going to work. Let's get to where there might be. Yeah. So in a case of there's some color, if you disable this, whoops, if you disable, I can't do that. Oh, well, I guess I'll just disable the whole dang layer then. So yeah, if I disable the whole layer, you see that it's color. It's like green and there's a natural looking dog, and then you get this, wow, it's pink. And that's because the overlay of that's this rose tinted layer that's on top has affected the hue of the layer underneath it. It's very, very subtle. You can also do the same for saturation. Color overall, so the color of the one on top will bleed through, and also the luminosity. So it's like what's the value in terms of brightness is applied overall. So this can be kind of used very creatively as well. So that's blend modes. Blend modes again, are a huge topic. They can be as deep as, you know, anything by itself. And knowing when to use them, how to use them can be very helpful. Let me show you guys some masking. So say we wanted to apply this opacity on a mask. So we'll just do a quick mask of the video. So this is actually placed on the video. So it's just going to show while you're, so it's just in place there. You can feather this mask so that it's very soft. So now when you click off of it, you'll see that the transition line is very, very soft and kind of, it transitions nicely. Or you can go down to 0 and it's very angular and hard edged. So there you go, there's feather. You can feather the mask as well. So the mask has its own opacity value. And like I said, you can expand and contract the mask using a single value. So if you wanted to have the mask start from 0 and grow like this, you could have a mask, you could animate that value by itself. And these are all independent of the original opacity value. So you have a master opacity and then you have a mask opacity on top of it. So you have the ability to modify any of these however you like. Now let me get to a point where I think I can do something with this, because tracking this is going to be great. This is a great demo right here. Okay, let's nuke this. So I'm just going to select it and hit delete. Come back here and I'm going to create a new mask, and I'm going to put it over this ball right here. All right, so this is going to be hilarious. All right, I'm going to feather that mask a little bit so that it's a ball floating in space. And now I'm going to try and track this thing. So I want to position. I just want to do the position of this track. Okay, so I've clicked on this little gear, this little monkey wrench. Click on position, and then I'm just going to start to move. And this is totally failing. What is it? Okay? So get what this is doing. This is why it's difficult. I wanted it to try and track the ball. It's actually tracking the sand in the shot. So normally with After Effects, you'd be able to correct this. With this, and like I said, I'm just doing this, so I'm like, well, I wonder if this will work. It didn't work. So
You can tell it the path in there?
you can basically tell it the path you want it to take by just keyframing it directly. So if we wanted to zoom in here, you'll see that what I've done is every time I move the playhead forward, I've added these keyframes. If for some reason I didn't like that, I could come back and so question. No, because it's using the underlying raw footage to do the track. It's more basic than you can believe. So if you wanted to do it the hard way, after a fashion, is you would set a keyframe here. You would move the playhead forward, and if that ball moves out of that keyframe, so let's say this is about when the ball stops being. So I'll just move this forward until the ball starts to be a problem. And so now it's looking like it's starting to make its way out. So I'm going to drop another keyframe there under the playhead. And then we're going to move this forward. And I'm going to drag the path. Come on, mask. There you go. I'm going to move the mask over here. Notice that it dropped another keyframe. So now that keyframe will move the mask from point to point. So you can do this by hand. You absolutely can. Okay? You can move that mask across the screen, one agonizing frame at a time. The point of this was, and this was a terrible example, that's kind of like, well, this might not work, and it didn't, is that you can also, maybe if we just made the mask tighter, but probably not. Could you track it now? Nope. It's still going to want to. It basically wants to track the the sand, which is, it's not bad. It's just not helpful in the circumstance that we're looking for. So again, we that scaling happens kind of on a keyframe. The track that we change to also moves across the screen separately. So this is more useful for tracking like faces or license plates or other things like that. So the most common use of this nowadays is blurring things out. So say you didn't get a release from this person or that person, and you want to use the footage for your riveting documentary film, but you just can't. You'll never find that person because they were walking out in this place, and you don't know where they are, who they are, where they're from, how to reach them to get a release under their nose. So you can blur out their face. In fact, one of the homework that you'll do this week will play with that exact scenario. Okay, so that is masks and a really bad example of tracking, but it's the idea is valid in that point. You see that it's tracking this little patch of sand, which is pretty impressive. I was just like, wow, that's cool. It tracks that sand really well. What's that?
Good thing it's not a drone.
Good thing it's not a drone, correct. What else do we got that's useful to show you tonight? That might be just about all she wrote. I didn't talk about, so notice what's missing in this clip. So you have fixed effects, right? You have a Gaussian blur, which is a normal effect. So you're missing something here. What is it? One of the fixed effects is not present. No? You guys are tired. All right, so this is the one that's missing is volume. Anybody want to hazard a guess as why the volume is missing from this? There's no audio in this clip, and that is why. So if you wonder to yourself, now why is it that I can't change the audio for this clip? It's because there's no audio to change. So just be aware of that. Ditto if you work in an audio only clip, you'll see that the only fixed effects you have for audio are the audio effects, volume, and the panner and the channel volume. Okay. These all of these can be keyframed. So that's what you notice here with these stopwatches. Okay. Get used to seeing these stopwatches. We're going to see a lot of them when we get to After Effects. In Premiere, I'm sure that you guys have done, like I said, you guys have done some keyframing, mostly using these fixed effects. The last thing I want to show you guys, this will be the last thing, and this will be fun. So the fact that when you look at these, when you zoom into this and you look at this, you'll see, what are we looking at here? Every clip that's in a sequence has one of these little icons on it. And sometimes they're different colors. So if we go to this one, you see over here, this one actually doesn't, the icon itself is not colored, but it has an underline. So these are all kind of visual indications to tell you what effects have been applied to this clip. Okay? So in this circumstance, this clip has no effects applied at all, either master or in the sequence. Has no clips or has no effects whatsoever. If you change something, say you go into this clip and you change you just change a value, change the scale, notice what color it is now. It's colored yellow. And that just tells you there's a fixed effect that has been applied to this. If everything's defaults, it'll be gray. If there's a fixed effect, it'll be yellow. If you undo that, it goes back to gray, and say you add another effect to this, like, what the heck, sharpen. Notice now that the color of that icon has changed again. It's not purple. Okay? So now you have gray for no effects, yellow for fixed, purple for an add-on or regular effect, a normal effect, right? And what if you have both? That's when you see that it shows up green. Okay, so that tells you that there's both fixed and normal effects being applied to this clip. It doesn't tell you how many. And the last one is this one right here, where you come in here and you're like, what's this mean? So the red actually means that there's a master clip effect applied to this. So you actually have that red underline that's visible there that shows you that that clip has a master effect applied to it. So you can, at a glance in a sequence, you can tell which clips have effects applied to them and which ones and what kind, you know, at least basically. So if you're ever wondering, is my, have I cleaned out for some reason you might find that you want to clean out the effects for a sequence, you can do that with a command, but then you'd be able to visually check and know that your clips have had all of the effects removed and reset. Okay. So this whirlwind tour of effects inside of Premiere. This is, what are we doing next week? Well, actually, let's talk briefly about, before you guys fall asleep on me, because it's 9:20. What are we going to talk about on a quiz? What do you guys want me to talk about on a quiz? One question. No. 100 points. One question. Yeah, that's right. Which way is up? So, yeah. What am I thinking? Yeah, that ought to be good. All right. So the topics that we're going to that we will cover will include such things as media management, like why you would want to do media management, what folders you would create, the role of intermediate codecs, why you would use them, what makes them what would be called edit friendly. What else would we talk about? We would talk about the role of the different types of sound, that you have different types of sound. You have dialogue, you have music, you have sound effects, and that they have abbreviations. What are those abbreviations? You will have kind of the role of noise reduction. What are some of the side effects of doing too much noise reduction or sound removal? And then we can talk about what we've talked about tonight, which is considerable as well. The role of effects in Premiere, how to tell that effects have been applied to clips. What's the difference between a fixed effect and a normal effect? What kind of fixed effects are there? How you can, I might not ask you about masking or tracking, but maybe I will. But I mean, I don't know that there's great questions to ask there. And that might be about it. I have to now go back and check the questions in the quiz to make sure that I don't like torpedo you guys with a question that I haven't covered. But pretty sure those. I mean, it talks about all of these subjects to this point. So that's it.